Everyone asks the same question at some point. Am I behind on money for my age? Today we're going decade by decade, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we'll be going through exactly what you should be targeting for your net worth at each age. And stick around because some of these mistakes that you'll be making in these decades can be costing you over hundreds of thousands of dollars for your retirement. But by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how much you should have saved and invested by every decade that you grow older. And the major milestones we're going to be talking about today are from Fidelity itself on how much you should have saved for your retirement. So without further ado, let's start with your 20s. So Fidelity's recommendation for you in your 20s before you hit 30 is to have 1 times your annual income saved by the time you hit 30. Now this also works for joint households. Just combine your household income, whatever that is, that's how much you should have saved in assets and investments by the time you hit 30. So that's the major milestone, but what are some of the smaller milestones that you can hit in your 20s to make sure you're on track for 1 times your annual income and savings? Well, the first thing that we're going to be doing is one of probably the most important things of personal finance is making sure we're living below our means. And to do this, we want to save around 15 to 20% of our net income into investments. Now, for people who don't need their money in the next 5 years, this is probably going to look like low-cost index funds, especially at the start, the low cost, and can have really good returns over the long term, somewhere around 8, 9, 10% if you invest into index funds like the S&P 500 or a total world growth fund. Another thing we're going to want to do in our 20s is save our emergency fund, because sometimes things can happen in life, and if we don't have any sort of emergency savings, we don't want to be in a position where we have to go into any personal loans or any debts to cover any unexpected payments. So this is why you should have 3 to 6 months of emergency funds saved up in a savings account that you can access instantly. Now, I've talked about emergency funds before, but depending if you should go for the 3 months or the 6 months or somewhere in between, basically depends on how many people are dependent on your income and how safe is your income and how reliable is that income. For example, a salary job that you've been in for 10 years, as opposed to starting a business that you might have been running for 6 months. Another thing for you guys in your 20s who want to be maximize your income straight away is making sure if you have an employer match scheme in New Zealand, that's basically KiwiSaver, if they're guaranteeing you a 3.5% employer match, you should be putting in 3.5% employee. The reason for that is essentially 100% guaranteed return. Now there's some tax on it, so it's more like 70% guaranteed return, but still, you're not going to find those sorts of returns anywhere else in the world. Now, one really important thing for 20-year-olds is you have so much time on your hands, and this is your greatest asset. Now, let's run through an example really quickly. Let's say you're going to invest for 35 years. What if you just didn't wait? Or what if you did wait, until you're 30 to invest? You're not going to invest anything in your 20s and you're going to wait till you're 30. We're going to invest for 35 years until you're 65. We're going to assume an 8% annual return. And let's just say you can only just put in $200 per month. Well, at the end of this 35 years, you're looking at an end balance of roughly $461,000. Not bad, but just for inflation, that's going to come down a little bit. But what say we did this, the exact same things, the exact same assumptions, but we started at 20 instead of 30. So instead of investing for 35 years, you're investing for 45 years. And this is going to give you an end balance of $1,064,000 just by putting that same $200 per month in for an extra 10 years. Now we're going to move on to your 30s. And so what's your goal in terms of savings and investments before you hit 40 years old? Well, it's going to be 3 times your annual income. So if you're making a household income of $100,000, you're going to want $300,000 saved and invested. Now in your 30s, you're really going to see some growth in your investments, especially if you started early in your 20s. And so there's a few things we're going to want to watch out for. One, we want to keep making sure you're investing at least 20% of your net income, household income, and putting that into investments. These can still be low-cost index funds. If you haven't already bought your first home, this is probably now the time to look at this. And we want to make sure that your mortgage payments and all your costs associated with housing, so insurance and council rates, are not too high of a percentage of your income. Ideally, probably not more than 30%, but if it is, there's things you can do like boarders, or tenants or anything you can do to help reduce those costs to get to a reasonable level, so we're making sure we're not house rich and cash poor. Another few things, if you start to have dependents and start to have children, is looking at insurance. If one of you or your partner were to die, or that's extreme, but to pass away or to lose their income because they're no longer able to work, are they going to be looked after, and how much insurance do we need to cover you for these situations? And if you need help finding an insurance advisor, feel free to give me an email. My email is down below and I can help you with that. Okay, so now let's talk about your 40s. Now we're starting to get into your peak income earning years, which income tends to go up into your 40s and even into your 50s sometimes. So we really want to maximize this, and if we can push it, sometimes you might not have dependents at home anymore depending on how early you had kids. We want to see if we can invest 25 to 30% of our net household income into investments. I've done a video before on how to pay off your mortgage faster, and especially now if your debt is coming down, inflation would have probably come up over the past 10 years or so of owning your house, and so your mortgage might be pretty manageable and reasonable, but if we can get that paid off soon, that's going to give you probably one of the biggest pay rises you're ever going to get is when you become mortgage free. So if you can get that paid off in your 40s, that would be amazing, and you can go on my channel to find out how to pay off your mortgage in 5 to 7 years. If you haven't already made a will, this is also a good time to do it. It's one of those things that no one really wants to do, and it's a bit of a pain to do, but it's very important you do it in case anything was to happen to you or your partner and your dependents will be left. Having a will is very important. And so your goal before you turn 50 in your 40s is to have 6 times your annual household income in savings and investments. Okay, so now we're going to talk about 50s and what we want to accomplish before we retire ideally, but obviously everyone has different retirement goals, so make sure this applies to you. But the general recommendation by Fidelity is to have 10 times your annual income before you turn 60. And your 50s is a great year. This is actually your peak earning years. Your dependents may have moved out of home. You might be mortgage free. So we want to aim to put 35% of your income into investments in your 50s. One other thing that I do want to point out is we don't want to do that at the expense of enjoying your life. You don't want to put all your money aside to retire, then your health to start to deteriorate. This is a time to live life, still save a good percentage of your income, and get ready for a retirement. One of the other milestones that was great to hit in your 50s is to become completely debt free, even anything interest free, 1% interest loans, even if you're on a low rate mortgage, anything, just get rid of all your debts before you retire, and it's going to mean you need a lot less income in retirement to not just survive life but enjoy it as well. Now if you're already in your 50s, this might be too late, but for those of you looking ahead, this is a great time to think about how the pension works and any sort of superannuation you'll receive from the government. Here in New Zealand, I'm basically assuming it's not going to exist by the time I turn 65, so what I would recommend people do is invest and save and assume you're not going to get any superannuation from the government, and then that way anything you do get is just a bonus to what you've already saved and invested. So those are the milestones Fidelity believes you should be reaching to have a happy, healthy retirement. Leave your thoughts down below in the comment section below and let me know what you think.